about the anatomy of structures. We're talking about thresholds, rooms, hallways, floors, and buildings. Right, so see how this umbrella is getting gradually larger and larger and larger? Because every time we combine two of these things, it's skills in conjunction. So we have to train each individual one as its own isolated skill, and then train on fatigue, and then put it in conjunction, just to beat that dead horse. We're gonna talk about the different constructions of buildings, permeable walls, semi-permeable walls, and non-permeable walls, and specifically how to address that threshold. So a threshold is any kind of gap of space between two objects. So that could be a doorway, right? It could be space between two cars. It could be the space between, a building and, like a little generator on the ground, right? That threshold is just the entrance to a different thing. We can think about the strong side and the weak side if we're thinking about specifically doorways. So we would call the strong side the side that has the knob or handle on it, and then the weak side would be the other side, the side that has the hinges on it, whether you can see them or not. We have open doors, which we would address differently than closed doors, right? Obviously, if you can see through the threshold, you have a lot more to work with versus if that door is closed, and then we have to make a decision about, do we open the door? How does the door open? Do we have to take the door down? There's this whole other decision-making process. So where the door is in the room is part of that anatomy of the structures. And again, like we talked about earlier, to have more predictability and have more information about the structure that we're about to go into. So we have center fed, right? So like this wall with that door feeds into the center of the room. And then we have corner fed, like out there where broken door in the corner is, right? It's literally in the corner, right? So as we're coming in, those two setups are going to look very different, and the placement of threats is going to be very different. Positive and negative rooms. This is just terminology that we're going to use, but feel free to come up with your own unit-dependent terminology, as long as everyone is on the same page about what these things mean. So a positive room is where the angle of entry is facing an open space, right? So the whole room where the threats are, the threat area, is in front of you as you approach the door. And then a negative room is the opposite, where all that space for the threat is behind you as you approach the door. Now, if you take the same door, say, right, a corner fed door like this one, and I approach from this direction, that's going to be positive because all that space is in front of you. The exact same room, if I approach from the other direction, it's going to be negative, all that space is behind you. So remember that these terms are relative to the group that's moving towards that room. And we'll talk about later on some key indicators so that you can know that ahead of time, which type of room it is, if it's positive or negative, corner, center fed. Again, don't get too wrapped up in these terms, because you, for your group and your unit, can use whatever terms you want as long as everyone's on the same page. So hallways and intersections. So think about a hallway, right? If, in a normal house, we can have single door hallways, right? So hallways that literally has a single door at the end. We can have multi-door hallways, right? So you're walking down, there's a kid's room, bathroom, closet, master at the end of the hall. We can have L intersections, where it's literally go down, 90-degree turn, you can't see around that corner, but you can tell from afar, like, okay, it turns, it bends. We have T intersections, right? You come down the hall and it splits in both ways. Or, it's continues straight and the hall splits off. And then we have four-way intersections, just like a four-way stop. Understanding when you're looking at each of these things, it might seem obvious that like, okay, these are all different shapes, but being able ahead of time to assess what that hallway is doing lets you know better where the threat area is. It also can help you maintain some like navigation of the building that you're in, right? If you're walking down a hallway and there's a T intersection, then on these walls, like these are probably not exterior walls on either side of you, right? Because that hallway has to go somewhere. We can also have any combination of these things, right? You might have one long hallway that's, a four-way in front of you, a T after that, and then it ends in a door on the side. It can it's probably going to be multi-door at that point, because why would you have a bunch of hallways that lead to nowhere, right? So we can just gradually build our understanding of what this whole area looks like with little pieces of data one at a time. So we think about the construction of buildings. This is going to determine a little more of these threat areas, just an additional piece. So you think about a permeable wall or a permeable surface. Right? Permeable means stuff can go through it. Specifically, we're talking about bullets here. So if you're walking through like a plywood and drywall house, the bullets go through that, right? There you go. Unless he brings his 1022 out, which would be hilarious. But it does have an FRT, so maybe enough rounds would make it go. He definitely does. Semi-permeable, right, would be stuff that maybe it's going to take a few rounds to go through, right? Or, it's stuff that's going to have to like chunk and splinter to get through. Larger caliber would go through it, and your like typical caliber would not, right? So maybe 9mm not going through this, but homeboy's got 300 Win Mag in the back, and he's just dumping, right? Okay. We're not really safe anymore here, guys. I don't know, they make level 10 plates? I don't think so. And then we have non-permeable, right? So that would be like your big hard cinder block. That would be, steel frame, steel construction boats, right? Like stuff that just around that a human is going to carry with them is not going through it. If our threat assessment is that the bad guys have like Barrett 50 cals with AP rounds, like, okay, then we're going to change this assessment, right? But again, if you're going somewhere and the most common caliber is 9mm, the second most is 5.56, and the third most is 7.62 by 39. It's like, okay, cinder block, you're probably good. At the very least, you'll have a lot of warning before rounds start coming through that, and when they come through, they're not going in a straight line. You'll be all right. We have this idea of moving in stacks. Right? A stack would just be an organized collection of people who are holding security and preparing to move from one place to another. Military terms, right? You're gonna see a lot of these like military photos. Typically, you would have a really good idea of how many people that's gonna be, right? Because it's your squad. You train with them all the time. You live together. You know exactly what's happening. But for us, if you're like all my homies are, spread out because it's this big national emergency, I'm calling the jump out boys because I need help. Like, okay, maybe it's just he shows up, and the other two are like having their own battles or whatever. Like, you just don't know, right? And so we need to be flexible with how we think about the roles and responsibilities in these stacks, so that everybody has, at the very least, a common baseline understanding to fit in where they can. The one man, the very first person in that stack, is focused on the threshold, right? They're focused on this most immediate threat that's right in front of them, and that's going to be this doorway into a space that we haven't seen yet. The two man, the second person, is focused on that next threat, right? So maybe, the one man can see one corner of the room, but they're exposed to another corner of the room, right? The two man is going to hold on to that corner, that next level of threat. The three man is going to be focused on that long security. So there's, we're moving down a hallway and there's a door here. Well, there's still the whole rest of the hallway. Somebody has to be able to look down into that space while the first two people are focused on the room. And then the four-man is rear focused. They're going to be looking behind you, because unless you have the entire building locked down, and this is the very last place you could be, like, there's always a chance that someone's going to sneak up behind you and get jumped. Just because there's supposed to be a wall somewhere doesn't mean someone didn't take a fucking pickaxe and make a new door or make a new threshold. So in a four-man group, these would be the roles and responsibilities. Now, if you had a three-person group, which one of these things would you condense?
Your long.
Yeah. What would you do differently if you couldn't have that long security?
Your one man would be more responsible for both the threshold and long range.
Okay. Right, because he's looking right here, and it's an easy step to go from here to here. Yeah, for sure. What's something else you could do to negate that risk or mitigate that risk? You just go faster, right? Get out of there. Remove yourself from that specific situation into a more contained situation like a room, and then continue your movement and do the same thing. Get out of that hallway or get out of that open space. Just a couple of different ways to do it, but absolutely. Tricky one. Okay, so now you have two people. How do you condense this one step further?
Go even faster.
Yes, absolutely.
You guys or welcome to. We have two sheriff's deputies working at night.
There you go. Right, so in that case, speed is security, right? That's your security, is let's get out of this exposed area however we can. Sometimes that means an extremely dynamic entry, right?
Or you just get your dog, and that's the third.
There you go. Yeah, you get 150 dogs. attacks.
Yes. I'll find everything, I promise.
Right, so we think about this prioritization, right, of like, depending on the resources you have, what things get sacrificed, what things get altered to adapt to that sacrifice. So let's think about individual movement, right? So I'm the one man, I'm looking at this threshold, right? If I'm just looking through the center of an open doorway, right? My eye and my gun can only be pointed at one thing at a time. If I'm looking just through the center of this doorway, there's a lot of stuff that could pop out or could give me important information about what I'm about to walk into on either side of my eye line. And the last thing that we want is all of that information to go either unnoticed or unregistered. And so we want to minimize all of that stuff as much as possible. So we call it being jam aligned, J-A-M-B, like door jam, because you're going to take your eyes and your gun and you're going to align them with one side of the doorway. That's going to give you a better view on all of the stuff that's in front of you on the one side, and it's going to protect you from being seen or shot on the other side. It's something we see a whole bunch when we're doing this, is as people are coming through the room, they're trying to just see the room, and so they're looking just with their eyes through the middle of the doorway, and someone's just gonna, boop, gotcha, right? Because it doesn't take your whole body to shoot somebody. It takes, if I'm looking through the middle of the doorway here, at my very dangerous water softener, all of that information on both sides, right? I can't collect all that information and make a good decision. Or even if I do, someone else is gonna have more time if they pop up on either side, because I have to shift and they have to pop, 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 right? I'm gonna lose. But if we're jam aligned, right, if we just pick the one side of the door, all of that threat area is covered. And now I'm protected from that threat area that I can't see. What we're also gonna do is we're gonna pick which side of the door to align with as we're moving through that doorway. So if I'm in this photo, right, I'm moving in this direction to the left. I've already looked at all of this open space. I've already seen it all. And so now that space is clear. I don't have to worry about it. There's space on the other side of the door that I have to worry about, but I'm protected from that, right? Someone else is gonna have to pop out, see me, decide to shoot me, or know that I'm there. All of that time, they're making their own decisions. I'm coming around, I can make that decision too. And action is faster than reaction, every single time. And so that person is gonna be like, oh, fuck. But I'm gonna be like, cool, I'm hunting you, right? By picking this side of the door jam, the one in the direction of my movement, I'm staying protected from the unknown space, and I can see and address more threats. Cool? Okay, security. So when we think about the security of our group or unit as we're moving, we're gonna think about it in different tiers. Our first tier of threat is gonna be this immediate threat, the one that's right in front of you, or essentially one barrier between you and that potential threat, right? So it's one wall or one angle, right? One corner. Our second tier is that next threat, so maybe there's two barriers and some distance between you and that threat. So, right, if there's adjoining rooms, right, and I'm coming into the first room, that second tier of threat is gonna be in that following room. We both still have access to the same space, and we both could engage each other, but there's multiple barriers between me and that person. If there's someone in the room with me and there's someone 2 rooms away, which one's the bigger threat? The one in the room with me, right? So that's your first tier threat, and the 2 rooms away would be your second tier threat. And then your third tier threat, that's that long threat like we talked about for that third man. Multiple barriers and distance between you and that threat. So if I'm walking down, it's that same hallway we talked about before, and there's a guy way down at the other end of the hallway, like that's your long threat, because that guy has so much distance between you and what you're doing. Like you want that guy to be covered because he can take shots at you, but that's a further away threat that has more time of processing for both of you than the dude that's gonna shoot you through the wall right next to you. When we're talking about our stacks and we're moving around our security element, there's never a time where there isn't a threat to be found. Maybe there's nobody there, right? But we can still find work in one of these tiers. And if your buddy is doing that tier, you're doing the next tier, right? If your buddy's the one man, he's looking into the threshold, or he's looking into that doorway, the next person to say, I know that my buddy is already looking at that doorway. Cool, I'm gonna fight to get a better angle in that doorway. okay, my two buddies are looking at that doorway. They don't need a third dude is not helpful looking into this door. I'm gonna look long. Okay, all these three guys have work. There's nowhere else for me to go. I'm gonna turn around. Make sense? Okay, so the foundation of the tactics that we're talking about for the rest of this course. Military tactics, and what you're gonna see in most, like the Ranger Handbook or most military educated videos online, all these tactics are based on the idea that you can continue to throw bodies at a problem until it's not a problem anymore. That doesn't work when it's you and your homie that are going into your house because a tweaker is taking your family or whatever. I don't know. A house is normally a platoon-sized structure that's 40 dudes with comms and air power, or probably vehicles, right? For one house, typically you would have 40 dudes doing that. You have your outer security, and then you can have a person die in every single room in that house, and we're good, mission success. That doesn't make any sense for us, right? A compound, right, so maybe like a little cul-de-sac, or a couple of different houses, like with pole barns and sheds or whatever, that's a company-sized target, that's 150 people, right, with even more assets. And again, we're expecting a person to die in every single room. I don't want to do that. You guys want to do that? Like, no, it doesn't make any sense.
I'm getting the negative real quick.
Yeah, exactly. We lost. And then a town would be like a battalion-sized target that's 350 people. Again, even more assets. You probably have air, you probably have mortar, you have artillery, right? We cannot afford to sacrifice one of our homies or our family or our partner or our road buddy or whatever in every single room of every house we go into. It just doesn't make any sense. So our tactics have to change to accommodate that risk.
We would obviously try and clear a house as fast as possible. But we would also be cautious of, all right, well, I got a guy in this room with a completely permeable wall. I'm not gonna put a dude clearing this room until that room's done, because if he takes fire in this room, you might have some flyaways go in. So how do you combat that other than just not leaving an acre at that point?
Yeah, that permeable nature goes both ways, right? So if it's, are we talking about like a house?
Mhm.
Just like a house? Getting eyes into that room can look a couple of different ways, right? Just to sort of start accumulating data, like there might be a guy in that room, or there definitely is a guy in that room. One would be everybody else is backed off, so not expose that permeable surface, and you take your team and you bypass that room as fast as possible and get away from there, right? Someone takes shots, you know they're in there, but you're already gone, so it doesn't matter. Nobody takes shots, it's like, okay, there still might be a person in there, but now the chances are lower. Or they're super barricaded, they're waiting for you to come in. Okay, what devices do we have to distract and disorient this person, right? Bangers. The other thing is if there's an external wall, like is there a window? Can we have our external security poke their head through the window, or use the mirror or the snake cam or something? Do we have other tools like a drone, or even like an extendable, like classic Band of Brothers fucking, or Saving Private Ryan, right? Give me your gum, got some mirror on the knife, okay. He's in there. Like, I mean, every different tool you have at your disposal. The nice thing about permeable walls, like, yeah, it's shitty because you're gonna get shot, but also that shit works both ways. Maybe you can make a hole from the outside, or from that one wall or whatever, from a position where you're still protected. You take your hoolie and we're standing around the corner, thunk. Now there's a hole in the wall. And,
Yeah.
right. We're just starting to accumulate more information. You want to have as much information as possible, but eventually you just kind of run out. You have to do something. So speed is one way to do that. Distraction devices, right? If you can take that same hoolie or fire axe or whatever, make a big enough hole, drop your banger in there, like that's like a banger in that corner with me sucks a lot more than a banger flying through the doorway than a bunch of dudes come through it. So just creating these opportunities for yourself, and permeable walls give you the same opportunities that High has. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You guys bring up the amount of guys you need to take a house, a compound in the town. Is your claim there that your method here is prioritizing our safety versus the standard is prioritizing the mission completion?
It's more about acknowledging the differences in how we would approach a target like that.
Okay.
For the numbers that we gave earlier, those are standard, general military numbers for planning and the use of resources.
Okay.
For us, the more likely scenario is that there's some kind of emergency. 9 times out of 10, that's gonna mean less manpower than that. Like, I don't know about you, but I don't know 150 people, let alone 150 hitters that I would trust to not shoot me in the back, right?
Sure.
So like, having those numbers in your mind is mostly just to recognize the dramatically increased risk of doing things in this way.
You also have to think about the large scale picture of what is actually going on. When we're talking numbers of that size, it's in a LISCO environment, so a large scale combat operation that has multiple follow-on missions. You're not just taking one house, and if you are, it's because there's a high level threat, something you need there, and then you're in and out. But everyone on the ground has a job to do that's far more intense than, hey, we just gotta go rescue my family.
Sure.
Or we gotta go make sure my house is safe and not burning down, you know? Like, there's so many other variables involved, and every time you add a variable, having more people on the ground gives you more opportunity to adapt to the target.
Absolutely.